welcome to the podcast. It's so good to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here, too. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. We wanted to talk to you for a while, and it's like, we need to get Daryl on the show.
I know. I've been wanting to be on here for a while, so I'm happy you finally came around to it.
So we're right in the middle of Pride Month, and you've got a book coming out.
Yes, I do.
Boys and Toys, season number 2, and the book called Connor.
Yes.
Tell us about the series, first of all, and then tell us about this new book as well.
Okay, so basically, let's see, my first season of Boys and Toys was last summer, and it was a totally different angle of romance for me. It was super fun. Basically, it centers around 4 best friends in the city, and they're finding love and struggles and hilarious troubles they get into. Season 2 is totally different. I wanted to take a different approach to it. So Connor is new to the city. We get to meet the other guys through him and get introduced to the whole atmosphere of the city. They're all novella-length romances. I think Connor is a great start and introduction to the second series. He's very fun, and he's bright, and and he's also a Kansas boy, so it's kind of fun to throw this sort of innocent Kansas boy right into the Gayville of this city. You also don't have to read the first season to read this one. You can just jump right in and read Connor. My plan is to have different seasons of Boys and Toys that are unrelated, read them in any order.
So it's essentially your version of the anthology series. You get the season 1 that has a certain theme and people in it, and season 2 comes and has the next thing in it. Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, well, it is. Kind of like there's so many, that's kind of popular now on TV with so many series that each season is its own contained story. Mm-hmm. That's what I wanted to do with the Boys and Toys. Also, I wanted to play with this idea of a book series that kind of reads like a TV show, where the chapters are more like episodes. Everyone kind of has a hook, so it kind of gets you going, gets you into it. One of my main inspirations for the Boys and Toys was both Sex and the City, 4 best friends in the city, and Queer as Folk. So It's a bunch of friends. They each have a story that goes on. The main difference between season 1 and season 2 is that season 1, all 4 of the guys were in all the books, and then each of the books sort of centered around sort of one of the guys. In season 2, one guy is going to have his own book. So Connor, that is his whole book, and the other guys they're secondary, but you kind of get to know them. It makes you kind of curious about what's going on with their lives. So I think it'll be a very fun experience for people coming into that series, I think.
And what does Connor get up to as he arrives in the city?
Oh, I don't know if I could tell you everything that goes on with Connor in the city, but I will say it's very fun. It's a lot of unexpected surprises. His romance starts right off the bat, so you kind of get hooked, and you're invested right in the first chapter, kind of curious about how that's going to pan out. He's constantly getting into trouble on accident, and he's so innocent, he's so sweet, but he's also like he's innocent and sweet, but then he's kind of got this, like, you feel like there's this pinch of he can get bad, he can do something, there's something hidden in him, there's some kind of magic power, and it's very exciting and thrilling to see because he keeps making these little mistakes, these little social faux pas, and his roommate is this total frat bro dude, and so like there's clashes. His landlord is kind of ice cold to him at first, because he doesn't trust him. He thinks he's this little twink that's going to get eaten up by the city. It's very, very fun. There's all kinds of things. He gets this. What brings him to the city is this really prestigious internship, which might not be what he was hoping it would be, and there's a lot of social clashing and whatnot. It's very fun. It's a very fun book.
Sounds like the perfect book for Pride Month, actually.
Kind
of a fun, summery, nice kind of read.
Yeah, very much so. And all 4 books will kind of be like that. We got a very wide variety of characters between innocent country boy Connor, who's new to the city, and then Brett, which is going to be the second book, who is his roommate, the total frat bro who throws parties in his house and is a little irresponsible. Like he probably has a little growing up to do. And then Dante, who is the landlord and who's also a photographer. And then Zach, who is a dancer at a club in town. And he's got he's the most mysterious one, I think, because we really don't learn too much about him, but you know that there's something else deep about him, deep and passionate.
And something called Boys and Toys. I mean, we got to ask, what is the toys side of this?
It's kind of both. It's like it's almost interchangeable. Like the boys are the toys. In the first season, there's actually literal toys here and there. Garrett, who is one of the four boys, he has a fetishy side. He's much more into fetish, and so there are literal toys that are incorporated in his arc throughout the season. And you might see a little bit of that into play in the second season as well. There might be cameos from the first season in the second season.
Oh, cool. I was going to ask if there were cameos, so it's cool that we get to see those guys as well.
Yeah, definitely.
You've got a couple other series that you've got running too. Let's talk a little bit about Spruce Texas, because you also released in that series earlier this year.
Yes. So Spruce Texas is a very fun series. It's super sweet. Spruce Texas is literally a fictional small town full of fun, loving people. It's exactly what you would expect for a small town. Everyone is in everyone else's business. Everyone knows everyone. It's a very small town. But most importantly, and I think this is the key ingredient, the special sauce for Spruce, is that it's set in a homophobia-free town. There are 4 books in the series. It starts with Football Sunday, it goes into Born Again Sinner, then Heteroflexible, and finally Wrangled. And there will be much more to come. I have actually another Spruce book planned later this year that I will be releasing. And I wish I lived there. I wish it existed. I like Spruce, Texas. Yeah. It's one of my most fun places to write. I love going there.
I love the books that really look at the world how you want it to be, and those homophobia-free zones that can be created in fiction. Yeah, and I'm totally with you. I would especially do a small town like that, because I love a good small town romance anyway.
Yeah, it's sweet. It's very sweet. It's fun.
Tell us about Wrangled, this latest book.
So Wrangled in particular it was an unexpected book, honestly, because my original plan for it was a sweet little novella about a Spruce, Texas high school reunion. I thought that would be a very fun thing to bring all the characters together, to kind of see how they were like in high school and to see how they are now and how they've changed and grown. And then it really just kind of grew into something very different. It became a whole full-length book right out from underneath my hands. Literally, as I was writing it, I realized this is not a novella. This is not a short book. This deserves a full telling. And even the structure of the book changed too. It's literally about Lance, who the moment he graduated high school, he was the only really out gay guy in Spruce 10 years ago. And he had a very different experience than a lot of the gay men that are in the other books. His time made him very bitter about Spruce. And so he takes off to the West Coast to pursue a career in fashion. And 10 years, he develops himself. He becomes this thing, this name. And he's right on the cusp of something. And then suddenly, it's time for his high school reunion. And of course, all of his friends are like, I didn't go to mine, but he decides to go to his. And he goes all the way to Spruce. And that's actually where the book begins, is when he goes to Spruce. And we experience the thrill of someone who is this is the first time in the series that we experience someone who's so far removed from the sweetness of Spruce, and he's coming in cold and bitter. And just, I'm ready to face this town that made my life hell when I was in high school. But because, even without homophobia, kids can be kids, teens will be teens. And so there's a lot more other ways to be bullied. And Lance was just very unapologetically himself. And long story short, the action of the book kicks off when he comes face to face with his main high school bully and finds him to be a totally changed, reformed guy that everyone in Spruce loves, gives to charity, goes to church, does all these things. And it just makes Lance see even more that his high school bully is now this totally likable guy. What the heck happened? And it goes from there. They start connecting, and maybe his high school bully has a little secret of his own.
Ooh.
And that takes you into Wrangled.
That ticks so many boxes for me. Small town romance, enemies to lovers.
Yeah.
The bully who's got the secret, which I'm sure is a crush. I'm just guessing.
Oh, bullies and their secrets. They all got a reason for their bullying,
What was your inspiration to create a small town romance?
Well, I am from a small town myself, and it's outside of Houston. And basically, growing up, I, of course, did deal with homophobia. I had unfortunate experience my freshman year of high school, right at the beginning, my freshman year of high school, where I basically was outed against my will. And I didn't have a choice in the matter. I didn't get to decide when to tell everybody. It was an overnight thing, and suddenly the entire school knew. And this is back in the late 90s, so it was a very different time, 20 years ago. And I had a lot of experiences, first off, with dealing with that. And I think my saving grace was being a theater person, because theater itself, for anyone who knows, is like a net of all the misfits of everything, because it's not necessarily filled with people who are going to pursue acting or directing or something theatrical or film. They're not necessarily going to pursue that later in life. So a lot of people just come in there out of interest, like they just want to try acting or they just want to do this or whatever. And that was my experience in high school, being surrounded by a bunch of other misfits. So when that happened and I got outed, I had a magical instant support group in that theater. And for 4 years, they had my back. And that's something that I know as an adult I took for granted, because not everyone had that growing up. And a lot of people, I can't even imagine if I had to go through what I went through alone. That terrifies me, the thought of that. Mm-hmm. So, we even had there were so many instances of homophobia that I had to deal with or even see peripherally, even homophobia towards the straight men who were in theater. For instance, the quarterback, this was my sophomore or junior year, the quarterback of the football team decided he wanted to try acting. And eventually he literally quit the football team to do theater full time because he has a natural talent for it. He literally just got on the stage and stole a lead role in the first show he auditioned for. And his coach was right on top of him saying, "What are you?" And he was calling him words like F words and 3 and 6 letter F words. And is this really what you're going to do? The coach, respected teacher, is supposed to be leading. And he's literally attacking him for it. And he held his ground and said, "Yes, I want to pursue acting. Yes, I do." And he did. And so, things like that are what I was privileged to witness as a growing gay teen. And I have a feeling that has a lot of that had a lot of impact on why I write the worlds I do, why I'm just kind of literally tired of writing about homophobia. I'm tired of it. I feel like without it, it wouldn't have been a big deal. The coach would have been like, "Good job. Go pursue your dreams. Go chase something that inspires you." Because it was homophobia that stood in the way of a coach being able to be proud of his quarterback for doing something like that. And also, I wouldn't have had to be in fear. It would just been, I would have been outed. Oops, everyone knows now. Great. Move on with my life. I was also very lucky to have supportive parents. My mom was my rock throughout all of that. So,
having met your mom, I'm not surprised she was your rock through that.
So all of that turned into my dream of what Spruce could be.
What was your specific inspiration for Wrangled? And maybe how did that inspiration change since the book itself changed as you wrote?
My inspiration for Wrangled, like I was saying before, it was literally just, I want to explore what all these guys were like at high school. It was originally going to be a short novella that had a bunch of different POVs where we got to see all the original couples from Football Sunday, Born Again Sinner, and Hetero Flexible, and how they were like in high school. And then kind of contrast that with the reunion going on. And the more that I delved into Lance's story of that feeling of returning home really spoke to me. Personally, for me, my 10-year high school reunion was before I started writing romance. I actually didn't go to my high school reunion because I felt like unsatisfied with my life. I felt like I didn't have anything that I could be like, "Hey, You know, I mean, if my high school reunion had been just 3 years later, I would have been like, hey, I write romance. It's really cool. I write gay romance. It's really nice. But I wasn't there. And so it was a very different experience. And I kind of imagined, because Lance is sort of in the same spot. He's trying to pursue a career in fashion, but he's like right on the cusp where he could be something or he could fail. And so I wanted to really explore that from a perspective. And I felt like maybe it was a bit of a catharsis for myself.
That's a good story.
Thank you.
You've had a prolific year because you've also had Lover's Flood come out. Tell us about this one, because you were very careful to label not a romance.
So April was coming up, and I knew that it was the 10-year anniversary of the very first book I published, which was originally titled Psychology of Want. Hilariously enough, Psychology of Want was actually originally titled Lover's Flood. I just changed
full circle.
I changed full circle because I changed the title while I was writing it, because I wanted something. I was just in a very arty mood, and I wanted to something that was a little bit more of a question. I thought Lover's Flood might have been too direct about certain elements in the book. And my mentor at the time, who is the now late Pulitzer Prize winning playwright Lanford Wilson, we got to know each other all through my last couple of years at the University of Houston. He took over the Edward Albee playwriting workshop, and we submitted a bunch of plays, and mine, out of hundreds, was selected among a few to be produced. And Lanford thought that I was a 50-year-old man from the subject of my play, and then he meets me, and I'm this little 20-year-old dinky-dink, and he was like surprised. But we got to know each other. I'm very grateful that we did, because he taught me so much about dramatic structure, characterization, language, cliches, tropes. He taught me everything. And then he actually encouraged me to write my first book. And he way preferred the title Lover's Flood. He thought it was much more romantic. He loved it. And for some reason, I was like, I just really want to name it Psychology of Want, because I was also in school at the time when I was developing the story. And I was in school, and so I was taking psychology classes. That's one of my majors. My two majors were theater and psychology, and that's what my degrees are in. And so fast forward 10 years now, I felt like, because that was my very first book, it was very raw, and it was seen and read by like nearly no one. And so I felt like there was something about the magic that I felt, the inspiration that I felt with that book, that I feel like needed to get out there, and I didn't do it justice, you know? So fast forward 10 years now, you know, this year, 2020, and at first it was just going to be a light edit, and it was going to be like a re-premiere of, you know, like kind of like, oh, it's 10 years of writing, crazy, you know? But in my light re-edit, which was supposed to take a couple weeks, it turned into a complete full revision. I removed so many portions of it. I rewrote so many portions of it. I cleared up the story. The main character was deliberately very unlikable, so I made him much more palatable, I think, for the common reader, which was very important, because my attitude 10 years ago was very different in writing, because I came from playwriting. So in plays, it's all about the drama. It's all about the darkness. It's all about damaged characters. There was no such thing as a trigger warning. You don't get trigger warnings when you walk into the theater. You walk into the theater and you're going to see something that will devastate you. You might see something that will make you laugh like so hard. You might see things that are about real slices of human life, it created in a very dramatic live way, because you're watching it. So because that was my training for my whole life, I hit the ground running with my first book. And my thought was, if you don't like the main character, well, this book isn't for you anyway. And I've gotten over that over the last 10 years, and I'm realizing it's really important for people to be reached by even the darkest stories. So I needed to find a way to make him reachable. And then I, of course, honored Lanford's memory by naming it its original title that it should have been named in the first place, Lover's Flood. So Lover's Flood, in a nutshell, is about a college student during his second year of college. He is a recluse. He's trapped within himself, and he has one of his key things about him is that he has a wild imagination. And as you learn, this imagination keeps him company, and it even keeps him company sexually. And you also learn that he has a past with an ex-boyfriend who was, I think is the best way to describe him would be emotionally abusive. And it's, I wanted to demonstrate an abusive relationship that is not usually what people think of. Typically, when people think of abuse, they think of physical abuse. They think that abuse has to be something that's hard. I personally have been in relationships, obviously, where this came from, because this came from a very real place. This book, Lover's Flood, is extremely personal to me. And I think that it's really important to see the softer side of abuse, that sometimes a person who's very manipulative and who can really get into your head and who can make you think that what you want is what they're giving you, which is something that's hurting you. It's almost a hypnosis. And I wanted to explore that side of abuse because I think that that's a lot more common. That's really, it's a serious subject. But that's not what the whole book is about, but it's a strong core of why the main character is what he is. A lot of my readers have been describing him with a lot of the same words, which is surprising. People are describing him as damaged, as sometimes demented, but in almost an endearing kind of way. He's, like I said, he's got a wild imagination, and it takes him far. And it literally, the story takes you through his entire second year, so it's a long time span. There's a lot of ups and downs. It's a roller coaster. While it isn't a romance, I see it a lot more as a coming of age, but there is a romantic arc because there's a person that he's interested in that you meet very early on, but he has no tools to understand this person, to empathize with this person, to connect with this person, because he's so trapped in his head. He's lost. He's socially strange. And one artistic element of this book that was in the original that I needed to keep in this one is the fact that there's no names. There's also no proper nouns. So the university isn't named, where he's lived isn't named. None of the characters have names. The main character doesn't have a name. And it's deliberate to kind of create, well, I don't like to explain why, so I'll just offer a suggestion of perhaps it helps create a dissociative feeling. But one thing that I've noticed readers say, which is really interesting, is they say it helps anyone fall into any of the characters and realize that this story can be about anybody. No matter how unique and strange and out there it might seem, this could happen to anybody, and this could be anybody.
Wow. I'm super intrigued by this.
Thank you.
Because the blurb doesn't quite give me all that, having read the blurb. And now hearing you describe it, it's like,
Yeah. That's the funny thing is kind of writing a blurb. You need to write it in short words because you need to get their attention, and you need to kind of wrap up your book a little bit in a package. Yeah. And this book is so difficult to put into a package. There's so much in it.
You write in a lot of genres. Like, I don't even know kind of what genre necessarily to put Lover's Flood in, but you've certainly got the romances. Yeah. And you've also got some dystopian and fantasy going on in your backlist too. What draws you to these different areas, and how do you decide where you want to work next?
One of my greatest loves as a kid was fantasy. That was my big thing. So that's really kind of where I started. That's where I came in. And also, like I explained before, my background in theater, I've always been one to tackle unusual things, even magic realism or sci-fi in a, not necessarily like a Star Trek kind of, sci-fi, but more like a very tangible modern day, this could really be, or this could really happen type of sci-fi. I found it really appealing. Things that dig into your psychology, your psyche. I think while I do kind of write in a bunch of different genres, and I do it purposefully, I don't want to be one thing. I don't want to be a gay romance author. I don't want to be a dystopian author or a fantasy author. That's why, like, my name, my artistic voice has always been everything. It's always been a whole lot of things. I think maybe if you could sift it down and find a common denominator, one common denominator I could see might be my homophobia-free worlds, because even in my dystopian series, which is the Outlier series. I've said it in a future that I wanted to pull apart these things that tie our society together, the negative things that are tying our society together, such as homophobia, racism, sexism, classism, all sorts of things, ableism. And I wanted to imagine a world where there's some kind of equalizer that makes us realize that really forces us to see that we're all human, and that these walls that we build, even boundaries between countries, they're man-made. They're us, and we should really look past that and see each other as people, human beings. And so my way of doing that was just to literally destroy the world and create a new one in my Outlier series. And in The Beautiful Dead too, even though The Beautiful Dead doesn't really have any gay content in it, it's the same sort of notion of breaking the world apart and putting it together into a different way. If I ever do tackle high fantasy, I do have fantasy ideas, but if I ever do tackle a high fantasy series, I would approach it the same way as well. And yeah, because my Outlier series centers around, it takes place in a place where there's no homophobia, and that's even with the straight guys. Like, straight guys can show affection to each other, and there's none of that annoying 90s era no homo attitude. Cringe. And I try to imagine the effects that a world like that would have on careers, personalities, the structure of our society in general, ideas like marriage and friends, and what it means when two male best friends can really show affection towards each other without the fear that they're not manly enough, and such on and so forth. And also gender roles and pushing women to do what women should, and men to do what men should. And there's none of that, especially in my non-romance worlds, like Outlier, queens and kings are equal in power, princes and princesses. And I mean, there's a lot of medievalness, but it's set in the future. So it's a very unique, it's like technology and medieval stuff and superpowers that people have. So it's a very unique world, but it speaks to me.
Some authors would split this stuff up between different pen names, and you're keeping it all under one.
Yeah.
What's your thinking there?
To be perfectly honest, this is kind of a silly answer, but it was kind of on accident, because I started writing my non-romance stuff, and then I was known for my non-romance stuff, because one of my first books after Psychology of Want, and then I wrote a time travel thriller called Super Psycho Future Killers. Say that 30 times fast. And then my third book was The Beautiful Dead, and then my fourth book was Outlier Rebellion. And fun story about The Beautiful Dead and how this is a little stepping stone into getting into romance. My mom really wanted to go to this biker romance event that was here in Houston because all of her favorite authors were there. This was back in 2013. So I was like, I don't know. It's like romance. Like I shrug. It's what my mom does. But I was like, sure, okay, I'll go with her. I'll endear her. And her being mommy was like, you should bring the Beautiful Dead book. Just bring a copy of it, and you're going to give it to some of these authors so that they can read it. Because I know one of the authors loves fantasy. And I was like, oh, really? Oh my gosh, it's so embarrassing, Mom. Don't do this. And so I had the book, I signed it, I put like a little ribbon around it, and I brought it to this author whose name is Madeline Sheehan. And I didn't realize how big of a name she was in the indie author industry. And I gave her the book. I was kind of shy. I was like, here you go. I write too. This is my third book ever. Here you go. Have fun. Didn't think anything of it. And then, little do I know, Madeline Sheehan reads it on the plane ride home, devours it, and couldn't stop talking about it. She went to social media about it. She contacted me. She said, what? This is amazing. Oh my gosh, you need to keep writing it. Because at that time, it's a 5-book series now. At that time, that was the only book that existed. And I honestly didn't even know if I was going to write a book too. She read it. She loved it. She told all of her friends about it. Suddenly, all these other authors started contacting me through Madeline Sheehan. I met Nicole Jacqueline. I met Chelsea Cameron. I met Jordan Marie. I met Sabrina Page. It just went on and on. I met all these different people who eventually became good friends of mine. Madeline's like total bestie. I love her. And so, long story short, she finally was like, dude, why don't you write romance? Why don't you try writing romance? And I said, well, I think of like Fabio Hare and Harlequin stuff, and I just kind of like, it just totally turned me off. But little callback, there was this one night where we were out at like some bar. I don't really drink, but we were out at this bar, and I saw this really hot guy across from the bar. And I was like, oh my gosh, should I go say hi? Should I not? Should I say hi? And then he leaves, and I went back to my hotel room feeling all dejected and sad. And then it suddenly clicked, and I was like, a romance book is when I get to go over and say hi and then see what happens and go from there. And I realized romance is life. Romance could be my life, literally every day, especially if you're single. Every day you're just looking around and thinking what ifs with every attractive thing you see. So that revelation, that oh my gosh, sparked me. And then I just started writing romance. And gay romance at that right away, and my whole life changed.
That's a great story.
I don't know if I went off on a tangent there, but I hope
No, you really didn't. It all connected really well.
Cool.
During GRL last year, you were part of the folks who were interviewed for Charlie David's What Women Want Gay Romance documentary.
Yes.
And for those who haven't seen it yet, you actually are the first person we see as the play button is pushed and the program engages.
Yes, I am. It's just my face. It's my face right away. Just get my face.
How do you feel about the finished documentary and kind of the stories that you told in it and the stories that presents overall?
I felt like it was good. I think there's so many aspects of gay romance that can be explored. I think it would take like a whole series of documentaries to really get all the different nuance. So it kind of grazes the surface of what the genre is, and the key point of, I think, the documentary was to highlight the notion of so many people who write and read gay romance are actually women. And because that, for some reason, that comes as a surprise to a lot of people. And, like even whenever I tell people that story, they're like, really? Like I would expect it to be gay men, Yeah. But I'm like, no, not necessarily. Because, really when you get behind the artist of any work, people, as an artist, you want to step outside of your comfort zone. You want to step outside of what you know. That's why you do research. That's why, you explore other characters. Not all books about murderers are written by murderers. Dexter wasn't written by a serial killer, So it's like, like as an artist, you want to stretch out there. But I think as far as the documentary goes, I enjoyed it. It wasn't new to see myself on, like in a medium like that. I'm theater, so I've been on stages, I've acted in plays. I was in like an independent commercial at one point too, where I played like this sort of geeky hipster. I've always been also very open about myself. Everyone knows my mom, everyone knows my life. I write under my actual name. I don't have a pen name, so I'm pretty much an open book to begin with. So
yeah, and the story, honestly, of you and your mom is amazing. Getting to meet the both of you at GRL last year, it was just like, this is such a nice family that's right here and supporting each other.
Yeah,
in what you're doing. It's really awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, my mom is pretty awesome.
I'm not sure I could have my mom read some of the steamier parts of the book, so I think that's very brave of you to do that. But
You should hear some of the conversation. You should be a fly on the wall in this house sometimes. My mom does read all of my work, including the steamy scenes. Yep. It literally is. I don't know how other people would react to it, but it's the thing is she's always read my work. Like she's never shied away from anything. And like, and sometimes she's a soundboard for ideas that I have, or whenever I'm kind of lost in a story or I'm not sure I want something to go, we have had like the moments at dinner where, we're eating and she's just kind of daintily cutting her potato. And I just had sent her to my chapters that morning, and she'll just be like, honey, I was just thinking about this. How could someone give a blowjob and like also open their pants and hold the back of his head at the same time? Like, that's just not possible. It's just not possible. I'm like, oh my God, Mom, we're trying to eat.
Dinner conversation in the Banner household.
dinner conversation. You know how it goes. But yeah, my mom and I are very open. She's a cool cat.
Which is, like I said, it's very awesome just to see that.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we're halfway through Pride Month, and all this month we've had authors reading from their work for us, so we can, hear a little bit of the work from the author directly. What are you going to be reading for us?
I was thinking I would read my first chapter of Lover's Flood, which is a very short chapter, so it's 3 pages. All right, chapter 1 of Lover's Flood. The good news is you can't die from masturbating, or at least I haven't yet. And I don't mean to sound awful, but my favorite part of the day is when my roommate rushes off to his morning classes. He's almost never back before the late afternoon. And since I have no early morning classes this semester, I get the whole dorm room to myself for hours. Hours alone are a commodity in dormitory life. I shake away my screensaver with a flick of the mouse. I double-click a folder called Psychology Notes, which is actually full of male fitness models flexing, half-naked athletes, and cute guys making out. Video clips I've gathered, organized carefully by model name. Galleries upon galleries of photos, also organized by name. I like knowing their names, especially if we're about to spend the next few hours together. It would seem disrespectful otherwise, wouldn't it? The one whose folder I double-clicked today is no surprise. I'm sure every other model, athlete, and stolen off the web hottie rolls their eyes as I open his gallery, knowing how predictable I am. He's my first choice. I always open him first. He's my go-to specimen of perfection, this guy who's worked his way into my heart and made a home there. 99 times out of 100, it's him I'm spending time with. I don't actually know him, of course, but his life is one I can easily imagine as I gaze into his soft, knowing eyes on the screen. I see him with a circle of his closest buddies. He always seems to be surrounded by a happy, bro-ish swarm of them. He's the kind of guy who laughs with his whole body, all his perfect muscles contracting with his every joyful bellow. He'll probably even laugh at a dumb joke I make, not wanting me left out of his circle. He doesn't exclude. He doesn't push away. He's the perfect fantasy buddy. He'll never be annoyed or angry, and he'll never roll his eyes. He's there for you always, and he lifts you out of any mood you're in and makes you see the better side. He's not just a sex object either. I'll never see him that way, no matter how fast he makes my heart race, and no matter what I'm doing right now below my waist. He constructs in my mind an alternate life. He's a kind of idealized, perfect love, a true love, a forever love. When he smiles, the whole world breaks apart before my eyes, like ocean waves shattering the shore, and I smile with him, and I belong. I don't want to say I'm in love with him. That would be ridiculous, of course. Crazy, even. What I feel for him is more of a deep, meaningful affinity, a kind of affection that is always accompanied by something like envy, walking alongside it, holding its warm, warm hand. There's a very fine line between loving someone so much you want them and loving someone so much you want to be them. I guess depending on which side of that line you fall, the world sees you as either a romantic or a creep. I'm not sure which side of that I follow. Maybe my fine line is a blurry one. Or maybe the better point is, it doesn't matter, because when I'm staring into his bottomless eyes, enjoying his brotherhood, his sweetness, his charm, and his allure, catching every football he throws with his jock buds, flexing his guns at the gym, goofing off at a party in his stylish clothes that show off all his hard work at the gym, beckoning me over to hang with him on the couch, that soul-stealing smile he gives me, I belong. And during our time today, I stare with supreme devotion into the soft-eyed, adorably dimpled face of my muscular buddy on the screen, and the tight, exquisite way his plain white t-shirt fits on his shoulders in this particular photo I've landed on, stretched across his pecs and wrapped around his biceps. His flat-billed hat is on cockeyed, strands of his messy hair jutting out in all directions from underneath its shadow. His eyes sparkle like undiscovered gems as he stares back at me. He lets me admire his beauty. He lets me live the fantasy. He always looks like a champion in every one of his photos, and I never quite know what he just won, other than my heart. Always, every time. Wow, that beautiful smile. And I swear he knows it, because the corner of his lips curve up ever so slightly in this pic, giving him that cocky, proud look of victory, the look of a guy who knows he's got me. Then there's a noise at my back. My door swings open. Oh, fuck. End of chapter.
Oops, the roommate came home.
Whoops, the roommate came home.
That was great. He's such a good character.
He's interesting. He's certainly interesting. He's got a lot more tricks up his sleeve.
There's a lot of stuff bouncing around in his head for sure.
Oh yes, like I said, his imagination is his core.
So, what does pride mean to you?
Pride means, this might sound strange to someone, but I don't know. Pride to me means to have a simple, unremarkable confidence that everyone else in the world has already, just to be themselves. One day I feel like this idea of pride will be obsolete because we'll live in that homophobia world I write so many of my books in. Fun story about Pride, if you wouldn't mind me sharing.
Please.
So one of the first years that I attended Pride, I had just finished that very first book of mine, Psychology of Want, which Lover's Flood is based on. And I had printed several paperbacks, and I brought them to the Pride Parade to sell them here in Houston. And, of course, I didn't sell all of them. I was practically giving them away. And the Grand Marshal of our parade, the guest Grand Marshal, happened to be Andy Cohen of Bravo 10 years ago, if you can imagine it. And he came by my kiosk, and I gave him a copy of my book, and I signed it. And he was all like, "You wrote this?" And I was like, "Yes, I did." And it was very awesome. He was super, super fun. And, of course, like my mom and I did the gushy thing. We're just like, we watch all the housewife shows. We watch Bravo. We love Bravo. And it's like super embarrassing, but we did it. And anyway, he started seeing us all around the event after that, and he would like drive in the back of a car and like wave at us and be like, hi Daryl and his mom. I love P-Flag moms," because that's who we were marching with that year. We were marching with P-Flag, and he was super duper sweet. And I don't know if Andy Cohen still has that copy of Psychology of Want, but if he does, and if somehow he were to see this and hear this, I would say, I have a copy of Lover's Flood that has got your name on it, and I would love for you to have it, because it would just make my life full circle from that time when I started out to 10 years to where I am now.
You should
Happy
look,
Pride.
like on the backdrops to like what happens live and everything. See if it's back on that shelf somewhere.
Seriously,
set dressing.
Yeah. Like, is my book on there? No, it's not.
So what's coming up next for you later this year after Connor comes out?
So what is coming up next to me? So I'm going to be releasing basically, if Connor's not out already, actually, I don't know, by the time this airs, Connor might already be out. So I would say what's coming up next for me, I'm going to be releasing the rest of season 2 of The Boys and Toys. After Connor is going to come Brett, his roommate, followed by Dante, who is the landlord, the sexy landlord, followed by Zach, who is a dancer at the strip club, the strip bar. And afterwards in the fall, I believe you can probably see another Spruce Texas romance coming from me, as well as another unrelated full-length romance that's something completely new, if my schedule stays on. And maybe even by the end of the year, I will have my next installment of Outlier, which my readers have been waiting over 1.5 years for.
Uh-oh.
Those books are big. I don't know if that was stated earlier. The Outlier books are huge. And it's literally, because there's so many different stories that happen at the same time, it's literally like writing 10 full-length novels at once.
Oh,
and then threading them together. I mean, like, my last Outlier book was over 280,000 words. So they're big suckers. They take a while to plan and write.
Yeah, that does take a while.
Hopefully I'll have that 5th book by the end of the year. We'll see.
So how can people keep up with you online?
They can like me on Facebook. They can join my Facebook group, Daryl's Doorway, which is a good place to connect with readers, be the first to hear things about me. You could sign up for my mailing list, which you can sign up at darylbanner.com/subscribe.html. Very easy. I give away a gift card every newsletter. I also poll fun things. And in my gift card giveaway, you have an opportunity to ask me questions. And every single newsletter, I answer like 8 to 10 reader questions in my newsletter. And some of the questions are very fun. There's some questions that get asked like all the time, but I put like a little perma answer at the bottom of like, these are the questions that get asked all the time, and this is the answer. Usually it's like, am I single, and how old am I, and how do I get your books? So I have the links at the bottom. And where else? You can also follow me on Amazon. I have an Amazon author page. Just click the follow button that lets you know that the plus follow, and it notifies you of every new release that I have. You can follow me on BookBub as well.
Fantastic. We will link to all of those places, plus all the books we talked about, in our show notes page. So people will be able to find everything. Daryl, thank you so much for hanging out. This was awesome.
Thank you very much. This has been a lot of fun. I appreciate it. And thank you for having me on your show. This is a total honor. I appreciate it.